The visuals of this video will feature clips from Enemy by Denis Villeneuve, Fight Club by David Fincher, The Double by Richard Onode, Mulholland Drive by David Lynch, Sinners by Ryan Coogler, and Mickey 17 by Bong Joon-ho. When talking about the novella The Double, clips from the film adaptation called Double we put in to substitute because no one wants to look at book pages. Visuals from the Fight Club might happen if the copyright lets them pass through, so if there's no videos of Fight Club, it did not pass. Literature has used the idea of a doppelganger since the 1800s, and film started using the idea of doppelgangers in the silent era. The narrative tool of a doppelganger can be used to explore identity, sexuality, consumerism, or mental health issues. In 2025, the idea of a double or doppelganger has been used in a few major films: Sinners, Alto Nights, Mickey 17, and Shrouds. Although these films were not the first ones to use the idea of a doppelganger, it is still a common narrative in today's age. The novella Double, written by Fyodor Dostoevsky, was a stepping stone for the idea of the doppelganger in any media. The film Fight Club and the novella The Double share a lot of common themes that are used in doppelganger narratives today, but without either of these works, the doppelganger narrative would not be what it is. Rather than focusing on the novel Fight Club written by Chuck Palahniuk, the film Fight Club explores the doppelganger through a way where the film has more at stake. The cinematic experience of the two characters shown in the film makes the doppelganger effect more pronounced. Rather than a battle of one internally like in the novel, the film turns it into more of a physical war on two rather than one. Brittany Stutzman did a study on doppelgangers in film. She says the double is a constant element used in film and cinema to break the barrier between self-perception of the double and one's true identity. Having the two characters side by side, it makes it easier for the ideas to be explored. Although some of the films and books that are out right now are not the traditional viewpoint of the doppelganger being a direct double of the main character, films like Sinners and Mickey 17 use the idea of the double from Dostoevsky's novel to create a narrative that is rich in identity, gender, or critique a capitalistic society. Mickey 17 is a dystopian science fiction film and novel where the main character Mickey gets cloned over and over again when he dies for the better of society. When a new doppelganger shows up for Mickey, it has a different personality. Dogovich writes about how the doppelganger is a mask. The paradox at the core of every doubling of one's personality is that the doppelganger effect always creates a new kind of mask, never revealing a pure, uncorrupted face or an untouched identity behind it. The pure Mickey died in the first iteration. The original Mickey will never come back. The idea of a new mask when the doppelganger shows up rings true to the idea of the double. When Gokagin Jr. comes in Gokagin Sr.'s life, he's no longer his true self. Although Gokagin is already struggling with himself, his doppelganger pushes him farther to the edge of madness. As the novella continues, Gokagin Sr. goes down a further path of madness, where the mask of who he once was gone, just like Mickey. Self-identity is something that all people struggle with. Masculinity is a troubled idea where men have to conform to a certain way or they get shunned from society. Something small like a male having his nails painted, as we see Tyler Durden have, can be judged by society as gay. Riddle writes about the state of gender and culture. Men who are culturally perceived as manifesting non-masculine qualities are considered aberrations by mainstream culture. A major idea of both Fight Club and The Double challenges this idea of masculinity. The doppelganger for both of these characters is a way for them to see themselves in the way society wants to see them. Tyler Durden for the narrator is everything society wants out of a man. He is good looking, it's literally Brad Pitt, he's smart, confident, and good with women. The narrator is nothing like that in Fight Club, but the doppelganger is a way for him to see himself in the ideal way society wants him to be. Rather than focusing on the novel Fight Club written by Chuck Palahniuk, the film Fight Club explores the doppelganger through a way where the double has more at stake. The cinematic experience of the two characters shown in the film makes the doppelganger effect more pronounced. Rather than a battle of one internally like in the novel, the film turns it into more of a physical war on two rather than one. Brittany Stutzman did a study on doppelgangers in film. She says, the double is a constant element used in film and cinema to break the barrier between self-perception of the double and one's true identity. Having the two characters side by side, it makes it easier for these ideas to be explored, like in the film. Although some of the films and books that are out right now are not the traditional viewpoint of the doppelganger being a direct double of the main character, films like Sinners and Mickey 17 use the idea of the double from Dostoevsky's novella to create a narrative that is rich in identity, gender, or critique of capitalistic society. Mickey 17 is a dystopian science fiction film and novel where the main character Mickey gets cloned over and over again when he dies for the better of society. When a new doppelganger shows up for Mickey, it has a different personality. Dogovich writes about how the doppelganger is a mask. The paradox at the core of every doubling of one's personality is that the doppelganger effect always creates a new kind of mask, never revealing a pure, uncorrupted face or untouched identity behind it. The pure Mickey died in the first iteration. The original Mickey will never come back. The idea of a new mask when the doppelganger shows up rings true to the idea of the double. When Gokagin Jr. comes into Gokagin Sr.'s life, he is no longer his true self. Although Gokagin is already struggling with himself, the doppelganger pushes him farther to the edge of madness. As the novella continues, Gokagin Sr. struggles more and more with his own. As the novella continues, Gokagin Sr. goes down a further path of madness, where the mask of who he once was is now gone, just like Mickey. Self-identity is something that people struggle with. Masculinity is a troubled idea where men have to conform to a certain way or they get shunned from society. Something small like a male having his nails painted, as we see Tyler Durden have, can be judged as gay by society. Riddle writes about the state of gender and culture. Men who are culturally perceived as manifesting non-masculine qualities are considered aberrations by mainstream culture. A major idea both of Fight Club and The Double challenges this idea of masculinity. The doppelganger for both of the characters is a way for them to see themselves in the way society wants to see them. Tyler Durden for the narrator is everything society wants out of a man. He is good looking, it's literally Brad Pitt, he is smart, confident, and he's good with women. The narrator is nothing like that in Fight Club, but the doppelganger is a way for him to see himself in the ideal way society wants him to be. The idea of masculinity in the capitalistic society is where the fall of men is perceived by Tyler Durden. The society encapsulates a man to be only a certain way. In doing so, it restricts who and what they can be in life. Society wants a man to take care of his family, be into sports, gaming, betting, and other manly hobbies. These hobbies are pushed by commercialism, though. In Fight Club, the manly hobby is the fighting, but is a critique on not just fighting, rather the manly hobbies, where these ideas of masculinity are deeply rooted in society where men cannot escape it. It isn't just about the economical system that men live in that failed them, but as society as a whole and other men. Sally Robinson talks about the idea of anti-consumerism. She says that the effort to locate masculinity outside of culture, outside of history, is a characteristic of narratives that depend on the feminization thesis to explore the cause of cultural crisis. The idea of masculinity is deeply rooted into both binaries, where you cannot have one without the other. This is an issue with society. If you are not masculine, you are immediately feminine, and then men will not accept you into their groups. The idea of putting people into boxes is where society goes wrong. This is where the narrator is filled by society. He cannot just be him, because society at large puts him into a box that he must fit. Being filled by society is where other doppelganger stories thrive, like Mulholland Drive. Even though the movie is a doppelganger film about identity, it talks about how society puts people in boxes in a way where they cannot live how they want to. When the film was being made, being queer in the United States was still illegal. Even though the doppelganger effect happens more in a dream state, Mulholland Drive lets Betty live outside the box and to fulfill who she wants to be. A queer study in Mulholland Drive by Justin Holliday states Betty and Rita can express the pain and beauty of living, including living as a queer woman in a heterosexist world by just touching one another, expressing their emotional reactions freely, and moving away from linguistic cliches from earlier in the film. This film breaks the heteronormative of society through the doppelganger. The doppelganger breaks the box away for Diana and Betty. The society that encapsulates capitalism and strict sexuality was not a place for Diana to live how she wanted to. On the other hand, the double presents masculinity in a hierarchy that Gokagin must battle himself, and that he does not fit in with the hierarchy. In St. Petersburg during the 1840s, parties and social gatherings were quite important to establish where your standing would be in society. One of these parties that Gokagin wants to go to, he does not get invited to, and he shows up and tries to get in anyway. Gokagin gets into the party, and Dostoevsky writes, he felt a rush of awkwardness, a shame. He felt that he has done something horribly wrong, that he was not in the right place. By not fitting in or feeling anxious while being at this party, Gokagin does not fit into society. This is the place where someone is supposed to socialize, get to know the higher-ranking people to make advances in their career. To society, in this environment, he is supposed to be confident and take charge. Gokagin does not, because this is not the way he is. However, that leads to the conversation of the double, where the double is everything society wants from the protagonist, or how they wish they were in society. Masculinity is tied to approval and appreciation by others. Gokagin Sr. does not just fit in, he was politically humiliated by his peers. However, he craves social acceptance and approval from others because society tells men they should be social, and this so-called acceptance by others is how you be a true man. When he does not get this approval, he feels embarrassed, but more so emasculated. When these ideas of masculinity, of social authority, charisma, and confidence are not tied to a certain fellow like Gokagin, they start to shun him and humiliate him, which causes self-identity issues. Just as Tyler Durden emasculates the narrator by stripping his office life away by saying, you are not your job, you are not how much money you have in your bank, you are not the car you drive, you are not the contents of your wallet, and you are not your fucking khakis. All these things, Tyler points out, is what the narrator thinks his life is. And that takes away his masculinity by making him realize those things do not make him a human, especially a male. People fear humiliation. Everyone wants to be well liked by their peers, by their boss, and the people they look up to. At the end of Fight Club, the narrator experiences the same fate as Gulkigan does by his peer. Tyler Durden does not humiliate him, but emasculates him further with his quote,
"Don't you mind people grinning in your face?
Free in all the ways that you are not.
Don't mind people grinning in your face."
Embodies the true manly experiences she has, just like Gulkigan.
I said, bear this in mind, a true friend is hard to find. Don't you mind people grinning in your face? You know they're grinning in your face. They'll jump you up and down. Just as soon as your back a turn, they'll be trying to crush you down. But just bear this in mind, a true friend is hard to find. Don't you mind people grinning in your feet? Don't mind people grinning in your face. Oh, just bear this in mind, a true friend is hard to find. Don't you mind people grinning in your feet?
When Gulkigan Sr. sees Gulkigan Jr. socialize, it contrasts with him at the party. Early Dostoevsky writes, "I am scared as a hen. Being scared is our special line, that's the fact of the matter." This clash of social anxiety versus socializing with everyone without a care in the world is a huge expectation in society still now. If a man or woman cannot socialize very well, they will not have networking skills and will hinder their ability to get a job, make friends, or other things in society. The idea of capitalism in the viewpoint of doppelgangers is not a new idea. Doppelgangers have been used to critique capitalism since the silent era. Metropolis is a German silent film that uses a robot that looks just like the protagonist to bring up a workers' uprising. A Fight Club critiques capitalism, and so does Metropolis. Cameron writes about the history of doppelgangers in cinema. He argues that the doppelganger motive became for the first time what Ralphie Thomas calls a project of the unconscious, a dramatically presentation of the unconscious personality in Metropolis. This battle of the unconscious personality holds with Gulkigan. Gulkigan is only jealous of the doppelganger because he is consciously everything that Gulkigan dreams of being. When the unconscious personality arrives, it's just not an inner battle of with oneself about who they are, but opens their eyes to everything they wish they could be. Also, it makes the main protagonist to see that the society they live in has failed them. Furthermore, the doppelganger for Gulkigan makes him feel even more alienated from the capitalistic society. His double comes into his workplace and becomes everything he wanted to be within days. It does not just show the horrible ways capitalism can affect someone, but shows how if they do not fit in exactly how they should, they are shunned away from society. Someone else can get these promotions fast and become a higher ranking official within days in extreme cases. Morgan Taylor writes about the psychology of the double. The most critical amount of the double in literature emphasizes the psychological dimensions of the concept, that the double sets up a relationship between the self and the other that addresses the inherent duality of human nature. One of the dualities of human nature is being exploited and forgotten about. Gulkigan works a job with no power, no influence, and his double gets all the power and influence really quick. The duality of human nature shows him if he were not the way he is, he could have had everything that his double has. The duality balances all of these characteristics of the double and himself to show how truly the one who fits into the capitalistic views of society during this point gets more out of it. However, the idea of the clash between the doppelganger and the main protagonist with social skills leads to the idea of how the protagonist wants to be like the doppelganger. In Fight Club, jealousy is a huge issue with the narrator in the second act of the film. When Tyler Durden starts to sleep with Marla, it becomes apparent that the narrator is jealous that Tyler Durden took something away from him, which was his sexual desire and companionship. The narrator is desperate to be seen by Marla, and by Tyler being with Marla, it destroys him. Same thing happens to Gulkigan Sr. with Jr. During the double, Gulkigan Jr. becomes close with the boss of the government office job that he works at. Dostoevsky shows the jealousy. He's on a special commission again, thought Mr. Gulkigan, flushing crimson and shrieking into himself more than ever from vexation. The special commission from the head boss is the job that Senior wanted. Gulkigan craved the attention, but he never got it. Moreover, Gulkin Sr. wanted the gratification to work in this higher position for the boss so that he can be seen. As a man in society, Gulkin Sr. needs to be seen by his boss. In an article about Mulholland Drive by Jamie Brewer, she explains, Rita embodies what Diana desires to have. Plus her adoption of Rita Hayworth's name, she is the physical embodiment of classic Hollywood. Everything that our doppelganger has is what the protagonist wants. This example from Mulholland Drive links to the Devil in Fight Club. Gulkin Jr. just does not work in the same building as Gulkin Sr., but even looks like him. Dostoevsky writes, he was dressed like Mr. Gulkin, too. Just like Diana in Mulholland Drive, Gulkin Jr. does everything to steal the full-on identity away from Sr. By stealing the identity of Gulkin Sr., he makes Sr. even more invisible, and that's what the doppelganger wants. By doing so, it makes Sr. crave the attention even more. In all of it, the protagonist always wants to be the double. Society puts people into a box, but the doppelganger either makes characters feel free or put more into a box in society. The narrator goes to group therapy meetings just to feel appreciated and loved by others, whereas Gulkin Sr. craves love and attention. He daydreams about saving Clara to be her hero. Dostoevsky writes, what if that chandelier flashed through Mr. Golden's mind, were to come down from the ceiling and fall upon the company? I should rush at once and save Clara Ulesafania. Save her, I should cry. Don't be alarmed, madam. It's of no consequences. I will rescue you. He is so lonely, he daydreams of getting this affection from Clara. When a character is not confident in themselves, it projects out to others, just like it does with the narrator. The narrator feels weak until the Fight Club. He feels strong when he can beat up another man. It is inherently a disturbing awakening for the viewer. The narrator had to exhibit physical violence to feel like a man. When Tyler Durden makes his Fight Club, the narrator feels free. However, this is the opposite case for Gulkin Sr. His double makes him feel entrapped into a society that hates him. The doppelganger just does not alienate our character from who they are, but the doppelganger alienates a protagonist from reality. In the double, Gulkin Sr. becomes so obsessed with his doppelganger, it ruins his life. The perception of the doppelganger becomes his whole life. Adenauer writes about the idea of the doppelganger throughout fairy tales and fantasy. The presence of a double is perceived in most cases as a threat or an uncanny appearance. It was just not an uncanny appearance, but more so a threat of the supernatural. Gulkin Jr. ruins Gulkin Sr.'s life to the point where he does not live his life. Frankly, Gulkin Sr.'s life in the beginning was not much of a life. He never socialized, but he became so fixated on the idea of his double, he never did anything else. On the same hand, the narrator cannot live without Tyler near him. The scene in the film where the narrator is at his job, he's about to be fired, Tyler and the narrator fistfight to manipulate the boss to give job security to him. By doing so, the threat of the doppelganger is an uncanny appearance where the narrator cannot live his life how he used to without the idea of not disappointing Tyler. Tyler is the true life force of the narrator. Even though Gulkin is obsessed with the doppelganger, that becomes his life force as well. He uses every second of his time thinking about him. Sexuality is not a one-size-shoe-fit-all experience for humans. In The Devil and Fight Club, they both explore the idea of homosexual friendship, with a slight leaning into a sort of homosexual underlining. The doppelganger lets the character have this certain connection with another man. Peele explains some of this homosocial relationship. The very first fight between Jack, or the narrator, and Tyler Durden, for example, ends with the two men smoking cigarettes and reflecting on the satisfaction of the release that the fight provided. This dynamic is quite a bonding experience for these two men and each other. They have a bond that cannot be explained. The same goes for Junior and Senior. Doik, a Russian expert on Dostoevsky, explains this bedtime scene builds on a passage in Dostoevsky's novella with its own homosexual subtext. When Gulkin Jr. returns to Gulkin Sr.'s home, the two men drink together, exchange confidences, and express affection for one another. Gulkin Jr. even composes a quatrain of verse for his host, leaving him completely and deeply moved. These moments that these doppelgangers share with their respective non-double is not a friendly relationship, but almost a parasitic bond that these two existed together for a purpose. The doppelganger needs the other character, or they would not exist. But their homosocial relationships add to the non-double's life. However, if looking at the idea of homosexual and homosocial relationships in the film, the idea needs to be examined in the original text. Chuck Palahniuk is a gay man who writes about the issues of masculinity in society. Palahniuk says that this is why he wrote the book. The other people who were camping near us wanted to drink and party all night long, and I tried to get them to shut up one night. They literally beat the crap out of me. I went back to work just so bashed and horrible looking. People didn't ask me what had happened. I think they were afraid of the answer. I realized that if you look bad enough, people would not want to know what you did in your spare time. In our society, it is acceptable for a man to get beat up. As a man, it's also acceptable to get in fights at bars or while camping, where society does not bat an eye at that. This issue is a part of the masculine experience in Fight Club and the Double. No one cares to check on Gulkin or the narrator because they are lonely losers in society that no one truly cares about. For the narrator to get beat up, that is okay. However, it is not okay in the grand scheme of life. The manly experience should not be to be beaten up. The feminine experience of life versus the masculine experience needs to be eradicated to ensure that these people can be true to who they are. And this leads to irony through sexuality in Fight Club. These hyper-masculine men are touching and grabbing each other in the way that could be perceived sexual. They have to fight with no shoes on or no shirt so that their manly bodies are shown off to everyone. The perceived notion is that the most masculine way to fight is without clothes on. It leads to ironic scenes later on in the film where the narrator shoves his face on Bob's man boobs for comfort. The intense way these men can be seen in scenes talking to one another, like in the AAA meetings, there's a shared love or affection for one another that can't be described as merely friendly. The hyper-masculine attitudes of this group further leads to the destruction of capitalism to their club, where they become terrorists. The military thrives off of hyper-masculinity for training and status. Schaefer writes about this. Conforming to masculine ideas and rejecting what is considered feminine is considered key to military training and socialization, such as internalization of military hypermasculinity may be achieved via crucibles aimed at turning boys into men. The Fight Club was a training ground to break the men away from society so they can turn on it. The military uses similar style of training to get troops ready for war. It seems ironic into the grand scheme of things that they are touching one another, but as a way for the men to get truly closer to one another to lead to a further goal with the destruction of capitalism in their own viewpoints. In the film Mulholland Drive, a queer relationship is explored through the idea of the doppelganger. Betty has to conform to society in a world where being queer is not an option for her, and through her double she discovers her sexuality further. The fragmented issue of reality is shown through the double, where Gulkigan's mind is broken through the doppelganger, while Betty, the doppelganger for Diana, blurs reality where she can explore her sexuality without consequences. Love talks about the exploration of queerness through the doppelganger. In showing Betty as Diana's imaginary alter ego, Lynch reveals the idealized image of the lesbian to be a ghostly effect produced by the sociality and possibility of lesbianism. By doing so, she can effectively explore her sexuality without being shunned by society, where in this dream world there is no society to judge her. Throughout the novella of the double, Gulkigan is always shunned from society for how he gets humiliated in front of his peers, but the doppelganger for Betty is a way for her to feel safe. The doppelganger for Gulkin makes him feel powerless in a society where Diana can feel free and empowered throughout her sexuality. All of these doppelganger stories share something in common, where someone is either at their lowest point of their life or they are vulnerable to be exploited. Gulkigan is struggling with mental issues, Mickey is poor and on the run, the narrator in Fight Club is depressed and looking for appreciation by someone. All these characters find a way to escape reality. Gulkigan daydreams, Mickey falls in love, the narrator has the Fight Club. However, the doppelgangers are the ones who truly split reality away from the original. Kinder writes about this. Marla unknowingly interacts with Tyler and the other copies of the narrator, while the narrator himself begins to find himself haunted and possessed by Tyler. Tyler Durden is the narrator, and we all know that, but Marla was the one who let him finally feel wanted, while Gulkin never becomes wanted by anyone. At the lowest point of their life, they get dragged down by the doppelganger, who uses their place at the bottom of the world to make steps for themselves. The doppelganger is attached to the protagonist. The protagonist always wants to break free from the doppelganger in order to have true freedom. By being free from the doppelganger, they can experience life how they want to again. In a few different film adaptations of the doppelganger, there are a few separate ways the protagonist breaks free from the doppelganger. Some lead to a dark ending for the protagonist, but some are helpful. In Fight Club and the film adaptation of the double, the main protagonist has to kill the double. Sometimes in these stories, pain is something the double and the protagonist have in common. If one gets a scratch, the other one does as well. The narrator in Fight Club shoots himself in the mouth to kill Tyler Durden to free himself so he can be with Marlo. Simon in the double, the film, jumps off a roof and hits a terrorist so he would only bleed out if medical attention did not get there fast enough. In doing so, the double for Simon dies and he is officially free. However, sometimes the doppelganger becomes the real character. The doppelganger is out to destroy the other's life. Britannica, says to meet one's double is a sign that one's death is imminent. This may not be the first thing that comes to mind for the protagonist, but it is an overwhelming sense that the doppelganger just does not want to be the original, but more so wants to replace them as a whole. Gulkin Sr. has this experience. The town rallies with Gulkin Jr., and Sr. gets sent to the institution. Dostoevsky writes, "Our hero shrieked and clutched his head in his hands at last. For a long while he had been haunted by the presentiment of this. He knew that this was going to happen eventually, but he did not know that the double would be the one to put him there. Being put into an institution this era was a death sentence almost for Gulkin." In film, the doppelganger is always positioned in a way where we can see their motives and actions more clearly. In Fight Club, The Double, and Mickey 17, the doppelganger is always in the way, or sometimes helping the main protagonists for their goals. The way the directors show the doppelganger is either side by side or a side story with the doppelganger, like in Fight Club. Tyler Durden goes around the country and starts more clubs. The Intellect firm talks about this film technique and says, adaptations of literary doubles into film necessitate innovative visual strategies to represent internal psychological divisions. This idea is strong with Mickey 17, where the new copy of Mickey is more aggressive and wants to kill the other Mickey. However, this is different in the novella The Double. Gulkin Jr. never gets these inner psychological divisions. Gulkin Jr., in the eyes of Sr., is just there to tear his life apart and become the new him, which he eventually succeeds at. The only time in the novella when the reader learns about Jr. is when Sr. invites him over for dinner. Although these narratives show the fractured nature of the human brain and fragmentations of our society, the doppelganger must spawn from the individual. They have to be broken enough for the doppelganger to benefit. The doppelganger in all these stories feast off the main protagonist. The doppelganger gains social status, sexual pleasure, and capital gains. The main issue with the protagonist is that when they reach out to doctors or others for help, they choose not to listen to the person, but rather they obsess over the devil. The broken, fragmented minds of these characters is of issue to society that they live in. The characters do not feel confident in themselves because they have to conform to the ideas of society. By truly being free is not conforming, but as humans we have a tendency to conform to what others want. To live free in the eyes of the doppelganger's protagonist is to break free from the societal rules and not worry about the societal norms of masculinity or capitalism, but it is an escapable box that no one can ever escape. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I didn't drag you along with these critical ideas that we have in society that can be seen through the lenses of the doppelganger. But these issues need to be talked about because in society we all get dragged down by these expectations of society. Some of the common narrative tools that are used in doppelganger films, like The Death of Doppelganger, are fun to talk about. But the ideas in society that we face are larger than we think and must be addressed so that we can have change in our lifetimes.